I'm Melanie. Thanks so much for clicking. To my returning subscribers, thank you for your continuous love and support. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please feel at home. Have you had an opportunity to subscribe to the channel yet? If not, take a second, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to like and share. I came across a really interesting video as I was doing some educating of myself on the YouTube streets. And this was when Julius Malema was invited to speak at the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It was looked upon, and the event was posed as a knockdown fight, an opportunity for two different perspectives, for the member to listen to different perspectives. We had Mr. Santon as one of the competitors and Julius Malema as the other. I thought this was a great platform, a place people could learn and be educated on different perspectives. They did it in a very nice formal environment with a nice dinner. But of course they had to have some hype. They called it the rumble of the urban jungle. They wanted to hear different perspectives so that the members of the chamber could make their opinions on a topic of business, economics. Obviously, this is a chamber of commerce. And as they came and presented it, I thought, the first time I watched it, I was, oh, wow, I didn't think of that perspective, and I didn't think of that perspective. And Mr. Santon presented his 20 minutes, and I thought of it as a professor giving a lecture. He had a lot of great points in his perspective. And I was thinking to myself, completely different than Julius Malema, for sure. But I was educated, and I listened attentively. I listened to Julius and again was not surprised when he had a very different perspective. Again, he shared his thoughts. Now that was the first time I listened to the video, but the second time I watched it from a different perspective, not just being educated and hearing what they were saying, but from a critical perspective, looking at what people were actually looking to get out of this event. So we know that Julius Malema was invited to represent the EFF's perspective, and we know that it was definitely different than Mr. Santon's. So when Mr. Santon delivered his 20 minutes, the audience was engaged, they were clapping, they were laughing, they were right attention.
I did. I played with the Rolling Stones in 1964 at Oxford. Check it out on the internet. Anyway, I feel very privileged to be debating with Julius Malema because I watched on YouTube his speech at the Oxford Union, and I thought it was one of the best speeches I've heard by a South African politician overseas. Not using any notes, just straight out, and then taking questions. And yes, I do have different views on how we can get our economy functioning, which I'll talk about tonight, but boy, you should watch that particular video. And a very good book was written 2 years ago by a French economist called Thomas Piketty, called Capital in the 21st Century, where he said that the level of inequality in places like Europe and America is back to where it was in 1910 through studying tax records. What are the flags that the CEOs in South Africa, for whom Chantal Ilbury and I facilitate sessions at their companies, say we should watch for? Number one, corruption. And yeah. The second flag that they raise is around quality of infrastructure and the fact that you cannot grow the economy at 3 to 5% per annum if you don't have a sound infrastructure. Ports, roads, electricity, but also the invisible things like education and health. You've got to have a sound infrastructure in this country. I have to say, I think there's a green flag there with Eskom. I think the spirit is getting back into the business. I think their two major projects, Medupi and Kasili, are now back on track. But there are other parts of the country where people are expressing their anxiety. We still have economic apartheid. We've got rid of political apartheid, but we haven't got rid of economic apartheid. But I do believe that we have to focus on small business because the nature of work has changed.
But then, other than when Julius Malema was introduced and they did the polite applause.
Thank you very much. leadership of the chamber and the leadership of the EFF. We have a deputy president of the EFF here, and the national. You are not recognized. We have our national chairperson here and members of parliament from the economic freedom fighters. Well,
As Julius Malema spoke from the heart, passionate in his convictions of his perspective of the EFF, it was as if the devil had entered the room.
I thought I was not going to say anything until you said there is a difference between us, because as you were coming, Mr. Santa, was very happy that we are almost there. We're finding each other, but I realize no, your understanding of economic freedom, it's completely different from ours, because yours, it's a promotion of free market and neoliberal policies, and we are giving economic freedom the leftist radical interpretation, which means, amongst others, that the land, the banks, the natural resources, and strategic sectors of the economy should be in the hands of the people. We agree that we need to create an equality in this country, but that equality is not going to be achieved until there is a decisive state intervention. Because those who are at an advanced stage are beneficiaries of a state that protected them, are beneficiaries of a state that gave them opportunities to the exclusion of black people. And therefore, to create an impression that black people should make it on their own without state intervention, it's unrealistic and unacceptable. The state must take a deliberate decision to nationalize the land and distribute it for equal use for everyone. The state has passed a law in this country that willing buyer, willing seller. Even if people want to buy the land, if there is no willing seller, will never own a piece of land. It doesn't matter how much money we get from wherever, God knows, and then we come here and say we want to buy a piece of land in Stellenbosch. If there is no willing seller, will not buy that land. Therefore, even when we have money, we'll still not own a piece of land in our own country. So we have to get a situation where the land is owned by the state and is given to all of us, black and white. Because 80% of landowners in this country are white people. Yet 80% of the population is black people. It's unacceptable. We have to have this debate, and that's why you call us controversial and all sorts of names, because you are refusing to listen to the truth. And anyone who speaks the truth is an unacceptable person in society. And we're not saying this truth in a violent way. We're saying it openly in a frank manner. 80% of the, almost 10% of the population owns the land. And without the land, we are nothing. That's why what followed 1652 was land dispossession. Because you knew that with the land, you have everything. You've got mineral resources, you've got natural resources, and you can do anything. So we remain a conquered nation. We remain a conquered nation. And like you said, in 1987, Mr. Santa, that negotiations must go on, parties must talk, and then thereafter, business must continue. Business is continuing as you predicted in 1987. Exactly what you said. Apartheid economy is still continuing. Because when you went to the table, when business negotiated with the former liberation movement, you made certain things very clear. You are not prepared to surrender the land. You are not prepared to surrender the economy. You told them you can have a black president, but you are not going to do anything with our property ownership. When the liberation started in South Africa, it was not about voting. Voting was by the way. The formation of liberation movements followed the wars of dispossession. And Africans realized that if we fight as small groups, we get defeated. We need to come together and fight together under a progressive body. Fight for what? For reclaiming of our land. So you can't tell us we gave you 1994, that's enough. That's not what we formed the liberation for. We formed the liberation to reclaim our land, to reclaim our wealth. The economy is the land. The economy is the mines and all mineral resources. The economy is the food. There is no food without the land. The economy is the banks, retail stores. We need the participation of our people in the technology and science, because we cannot succeed to fight even diseases that can be cured for as long as our people do not own pharmaceutical companies. The diseases that must be cured easily kill our people, because pharmaceutical companies are owned by capital which is obsessed with maximizing profit at the expense of people. So we don't subscribe to those types of, all of this infrastructure me and you must agree about, which we're agreeing, will never be realized, because it has been proven that taxes alone cannot raise sufficient capital for the state. We have been collecting taxes since 1994. We still have a problem of infrastructural development because the money is not enough. We said to capital, run the economy, take charge of the economy, and through you paying taxes, then we'll be able as a state to develop this country. The same capital which we said run the economy still is not paying tax. They engage in financial illicit flows. They engage in aggressive tax avoidance in the country. No decisive legislation to deal with that. People take money in South Africa and invest it in tax havens. They are untouchable. If you do anything to them that is an interference, the state must not interfere. People, the investors will leave the country if the state goes on interfering in the economy. So we do not agree. We have this problem. We have this problem we are having today of an inequality which is growing, which is racially based, because of the economy which is in the hands of capital. The economy is not in the hands of the state as we speak now. It's in your hands. You are the ones who are owning strategic sectors of the economy. And therefore, if anything that is in the hands of private sector is so excellent and successful, why is Africa not successful? Because the economy of Africa is not in the hands of socialist state or communist state. It's private owned. If capitalism worked for America and Europe, capitalism has not worked for Africa. Africa has not failed because of because of communist or socialist economic policies. It failed because the multinational and capitalists come and milk our resources, exploit our resources, and leave this continent without anything. So we do not agree. So a solution, which is very clear in the hands of the EFF, is that we need the expropriation of land without compensation. And people say that is extreme, that is unacceptable. land was taken through black genocide. We're not talking white genocide. We're talking legislation passed through parliament, democratic parliament, which will say the state is the owner of the land and the land shall be allocated to people who have indicated clearly what they want to do with this land. And whether what they want to do, it is in the public interest and purpose. Because there are a lot of pieces of land all over the continent. They are idling. Some of them are even foreign owned. Yet black people live in congested environments. They do not own a piece of land. When they try to occupy the land next to them, no, that land has been rezoned, is owned by some fellow in London. We live like pigs. In Alexander, in Langa, here, everywhere else, we have no land. And that is the first thing we need to do, expropriate the land so that we bring back the dignity of our people. There is no one who can have dignity and confidence if you do not own a piece of property. You remain a subject of those who own the means of production. We are tired of being subjects. We want to own. So we are of a view that even the mines, the banks, must be in the state ownership. But what do you do in a South African economy where already these things are in the hands of capital? You must establish your own bank as a state. To compete the existing banks, you must establish your own state-owned mining company. You must establish your own pharmaceutical company. So and by doing that, we do not shut down private ownership. The private ownership must coexist with state ownership, but the state must be the owner and the controller of such strategic sectors of the economy. Somebody is going to shout from the back and say the state is incompetent, and everywhere else where the state is found, things do not run properly. It's not true. It's not true. I'm prepared to take you on, because American army is not private owned. It's a state owned. It's the biggest employer in the whole world. American army is one of the best state-owned companies. This GPS you are talking about is a GPS that is produced by a state-owned company called American Army. This internet you have is produced by a state-owned company called American Army. So we must not be misled that everything else state-owned is inherently corrupt and therefore it will collapse. Even the private sector has got the same problem. The private sector, if we go to Joburg High Court here, there are private companies being liquidated every day. So it's not true that everything else owned by private sector is inherently progressive. We all have weaknesses. Yes, come back home. SAA, who said SAA never produced profit before? The SAA produced profit before until the current government messed it up. So it's not because the SAA as a state-owned company is inherently incompetent. You need a corrupt-free government which will deploy the best men and women for the job to run state institutions and not to deploy friends. This ESCOM you are talking about, it ran properly at some point. And what is good about the whole thing is that there are some lessons we can learn from apartheid, because these things were state-owned under apartheid. They were state-owned under apartheid. They did well under apartheid, but for the few. So we have to learn and say, instead of deploying cadres and party loyalists, let us get the best people to come and do the job. Now, we have a situation in a country where most of the state-run institutions did well before, and as a result of the current corrupt leadership, they are collapsing. They are collapsing, and therefore we must not say because there is an incapable leadership, state institutions will inherently not do well. I mean, we can give many examples. Singapore is one of the countries with state-owned enterprises which are contributing decisively to the economy. So we're saying here in South Africa, anything that is going to help us, it is a state intervention in partnership with private sector to run a successful economy. Anyway, as you were shouting at the back, I was not shocked because I don't raise comfortable things. I must touch the nerve. And I don't get easily shaken, whether by sober or half sober people. I have no problem at all. No one get to scare me. I express myself anywhere free, without any fear or any intention of begging relationships. I'm here to articulate the EFF policy. You like it or not, it doesn't matter. We are happy that the Cape Chamber invited us, not because we share anything, but because we can exchange ideas. What is going to make South Africa work? What is going to make South Africa work is platforms like this, where we sit together and exchange ideas, sometimes in a robust manner, because it is good for our democracy. We cannot just sit in our comfort zones and not talk to each other. We have to talk to one another, sometimes uncomfortable as it might be. It's a necessary discourse because it will build this country. That's Madiba's legacy, the ability to talk to those you even disagree with. That's where we come from, and we believe that with this type of intervention, South Africa will be a better place. We've noted all those international developments, and even when it was nice time internationally, we were still doing bad, not because of the global economy, but because of the policies which were agreed to during the sunset clauses. We need the sunrise clauses. Thank you.
They listened. Their faces did not show smiles. There was no laughter. There was no applause. Now, persons could think people were listening attentively, but as he continued to talk about the importance of land and his perspective of business, how it needed to be state-owned in order for South Africa to move forward, he also shared his perspectives in many areas. And again, we know Julius, he's not going to hold punches, he's going to say it how it is, and he's not going to question his thoughts, and he's going to speak from the heart. Even when the audience was rude and started heckling in the back, he stayed on track, and he even said, it's okay for those who are sober or partially sober to want to speak up and yell out, because I know the truth can be uncomfortable. I smiled at that and I thought, yes, absolutely. Of course, when you're hearing a different perspective that you don't agree with or are not comfortable with, you're going to react differently. And unfortunately, some of the members of the audience did that. So after each of them had 20 minutes to share their perspectives, they then were opened the floor to questions. And there were a couple questions that really stood out. Some came from a good place of interest and curiosity. Others came to make a point. One woman came forward and said, she had actually asked the question of Mr. Santon because he was talking about the importance of entrepreneurship and small businesses. And she explained that she had been in the industry of automotives for years as a dealership manager. But she wanted to look at it as ownership. But there was no way a black woman would be able to own any sort of business until there were different things taken. She spoke from the heart, and you could see the frustration she had felt.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcia Mayaba. I've got a question for Mr. Clem Santa. Mr. Santa, I work in the motor industry with many first black female moments, and I was appointed for one of the automotive brands as a first black female dealer principal 5 years ago. I am now talking a different language. I would like to own my own dealership, and it seems like I'm now suddenly speaking French, because as far as the BE codes go, they are still trying to tick the boxes at level 4, 3, and 2. I'm talking ownership, and it seems like I'm just knocking on doors and nothing is happening. And for me, I don't understand. The elephant in the room, it's which brand would not want to go into partnership with me, in the sense that I'm an experienced black female with a solid track record in the industry for over 19 years. But nobody's picking me, and I'm talking about the top 10 major automotive brands in the country.
After 19 years in the industry, she was being neglected or looked over. And Mr. Santin came and said, I really wanted to address this. I feel your pain, and talked about different.
We've got to realize that we don't have that kind of entrepreneurial energy that you see in places like Lagos, that you see in Hong Kong, that you see in Istanbul, because we haven't structured our economy for really good male and female entrepreneurs to open up businesses. We have to accept that, as Mr. Malema said, we have a problem with the land and the ownership of land, and we've got to jointly find a way out of that problem. But secondly, we have got to think of ways of really opening up our economy. And by that, I mean really opening it up. And that's why I've been calling for the last few years for an economic CODESA similar to the political CODESAs, because this is a much bigger problem, because this affects everybody's daily life. They exercise the vote every so often, but you have to live every day in the economy, and therefore I totally sympathize with the point made by the lady, and I feel very strongly that we have to think of ways of creating a proper relationship between big business and small business, which is entirely different to what we have today.
Things, but really didn't get to the heart of the matter, that black women aren't going to be looked upon for entrepreneurship until the land issue and the bank issues are addressed that Julius was bringing up. Another doctor asked questions about medications and about legalizing drugs.
My name is Keith Scott. This is a question for Mr. Malema. I'd just like to ask him, he did say he was going to nationalize cannabis at one stage, and that's apropos of my question. This stuff, alcohol, contributes, I think, between 15 and 20% in taxes every year to this economy. And we're not going to ban alcohol anytime soon. But we do have other drugs like cannabis, which are far safer than alcohol, as are many of the other banned drugs. And I want to know Mr. Malema's view on the possibility of legalizing many of those drugs for recreational use, because they are far safer.
And asked this of Julius. And Julius Malema spoke again very generally, because of course he has to analyze what's being said, but spoke clearly that he saw the value in this.
On the issue of the drugs, we agree that there are some of them which can be considered for use, others for medical purpose, and others for some of the reasons you have advanced. Because I'm not a doctor, but I'm made aware that most of the Western medication we take has got a bit of alcohol, and that alcohol is regulated. So and even people who don't take alcohol ordinarily, they end up taking that alcohol through that medication because it's properly regulated. The same thing should apply to any drug which we discovered that this can be used, it cannot be dangerous, but it has to be regulated so that it doesn't become a danger in society. Like marijuana, we may have to decide how we're going to go about it and ensure that it doesn't become a danger in society. And it can go a long way in creating as well opportunities for our people, and also contributing to the fiscals, because people are selling it now and the state doesn't benefit anything out of it. So if it's properly regulated, I agree we can find something.
But the one question that really, really made me stop and think was a young white man who's a doctor, and he addressed Julius Malema, especially about the land. He said, I've gone to school, I've had a business, I work 160 hours a week as a doctor. I own my own land. Are you saying that I need to give up my land? And I'm sure this was a question that many white South Africans are asking, because they're not understanding the whole aspect of the land reparation. I felt in the moment that man's panic, pain, frustration.
I'm very interested when you talk about we and they. We're roughly the same age. I was 12 when Madiba was released from prison, and I was 14 when the election happened. I'm a medical doctor. I work sometimes 160-hour weeks. I work sometimes 18 hours a day, and I own property because of that reason. And it sounds to me that you're suggesting that I should do all that work and come to this point in my life and now just hand away my property. And that concerns me.
But Julius answered the question beautifully. He acknowledged that this young man was an exception to the rule, but explained how it would work and why. I thought it was clear and concise and to the point.
You know, you are an exceptional case. If you were to stand up and say, I went to school and I'm a medical doctor and the property I have is because I went to school and I bought it. But most of your people didn't buy any property, they inherited it. So it's an exceptional case. Now you can disagree, but the reality is that you are in possession of a land that was stolen from us. And we want it back without any apology. We want that land back, and we are going to work together. I can tell you now, whether you are in denial or not, the demand for the land is growing and people are becoming impatient. And we don't want Zimbabwe here. We don't want Zimbabwe in this country. It has to be done legally, procedurally, in a manner that is not going to put the country and the economy in a disaster. We have to talk about it. We have to say, how do we, in a proper manner, make sure that everyone benefit from this land? So, you know, Mr. Santa will know, and those who were involved in the negotiations and pre-negotiations, that when it was inevitable for democracy to be ushered in, most of the corrupt state officials began to transfer land into the names of individuals. When we're building a road in Northwest, expanding a road in Northwest from Rustenburg to Mafikeng, the state had to now get into some farms so that, because they didn't have land reserves, so they had to go and take some portions of land as they go along, and then made a call. All those who were affected by our expropriation of land, please come forward so that we can compensate you. Very few people turned up. And the suspicion is that they do not have title deeds. People just declared, this is my land, just before 1994. So don't individualize a big problem. It's like when I say there is racism in this country and you come to me, but I'm not a racist. I'm not talking about you. If you're not racist, why are you worried? But generally there is a problem of racism. It's not about an individual. It's a group problem. It is an institutionalized problem. We have to deal with it. And if we don't talk about it,
we will not recognize it as a problem, and because we have not recognized it as a problem, now we will not be in a position to solve that problem. You can't solve the problems which you have not identified. So let us not be sensitive. I mean, you are a graduate, you are a doctor, you own a piece of property. I've got a black doctor here with me, very young also, a graduate, and he owns property. We're not taking your property only. We're talking also his property, the flat he owns, a flat size. His flat is almost the size of your bathroom for sure. But even that, we're taking from him. So it's not about black or white. All of us, we need to surrender our land to the state and give that state an opportunity to allocate it for proper use. You can shake your hand, I'm proposing a peaceful solution. You're refusing it, you will surrender it to the revolution.
After they did several rounds of questions, they also had an opportunity to counteract each other's conversations. So Julius Malema was able to comment on Mr. Santon and Mr. Santon vice versa. I love this forum, and it was a great forum for people to learn different perspectives. And it'd be really beneficial if it was done in a way that wasn't meant to set anybody up. I encourage you to check this video, and I encourage us all to take time to listen to different perspectives. We don't have to agree with Julius Malema's thoughts, the EFS processes or manifesto, and we don't have to agree with Mr. Santon either. But what I loved about the Chamber of Commerce coming together to bring different perspectives is to answer the questions of their members, to ask what they need to know and what they want to learn, and for people to be progressive, to learn and work together to collaborate on a new, successful South Africa. What are your thoughts on this video? Did you see it the same way as I did, from educating, or in the critical perspective after you watched it again? Love to hear your comments, drop them below. Let's carry on this conversation. And as I continue to educate myself on different perspectives in South Africa, I'll come back and share some more. But until then, please don't forget to hit subscribe, like and share, and that notification button, the bell, click it, because that way you'll be notified each and every time I upload some new content for you to come back and have a conversation with me. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.